Okay, I'm Paul McCutcheon. I'm Professor of Law at University of Limerick, but I'm here in a very different capacity. Um, my father was the first personnel manager in Krups when Krups moved to Ireland, or had proposed to move to Ireland. That was in, I think, 1963. My father, if I recall, was recruited before the company moved here, and he brought a number of trainees, the original employees in the company. He brought them to Zillingen to be trained in the manufacturing jobs and the skilled jobs that would be required when the factory was opened the following year in 1964. So my parents and their children, myself included, moved to Germany for that year, for 1963, 1964. I was aged 5 at the time. I had 2 younger sisters. One was 1 and a bit, and the other was a bit, I guess. You know, she was maybe 3 or 4 months, and my other sister was a year and 4 months. So we moved as a family to Solingen. My father obviously was working with Krups and was, like men at that time, was out of the house all day, was at work. My mother was a stay-at-home mother at the time and looked after 3 children, which I guess was a challenge for her, and you can ask me about that in a while. My own experience was I went to kindergarten in Zolingen, which was quite different to the experience of going to school in Ireland. So I went there every day, Monday to Friday, I guess, and spent my time in kindergarten. For me, it was all very natural. I wasn't conscious of being in a different country. I was conscious I was in Germany rather than Ireland, but I wasn't conscious of it being a different language or a different group. I think my recollection is everything was very natural. I do recall having 1 or 2 friends near the apartment where we lived. They were in adjoining apartments about my age. I remember their names, Krista and Wolfgang. I can remember very little else about them, but I do recall playing with them, going to their apartments and that. And I wasn't conscious of whether I was speaking German or English. I presume they didn't speak English if they were about 5 or 6 years old. My other recollections are, I do remember the street we were in, and I've looked it up on Google Earth subsequently, and it hasn't changed. I've looked up the building and the apartment. There was a park, a public park at the end of the road with fruit trees, which I remember. And on a fairly regular basis, it wouldn't happen nowadays, but on a fairly regular basis, my mother would send me to the local bakery to buy bread and wurst, things like that. It was quite a walk away, you know. It was maybe about not quite a kilometre, but something of that order. It was at the far end of the street. So in those days, parents did send children out to run errands. I don't think it would be done nowadays. Reflecting back on it, I think about my mother and what the experience for her. Whilst my father was at work and he had learned some German, obviously, to be able to work in a German environment. My mother didn't have any German when we moved to Germany and had 3 very young children. So it must have been quite difficult for her to be a stay-at-home mother with 3 young children, operating or working in an environment where she didn't have the language. My parents' social acquaintances all derived from work. So my mother's friends would have been wives of my father's work colleagues. So I don't recall that she had, should we say, an independent life when we were in Germany, that she had an independent existence in the sense that she met other mothers at kindergarten or things like that.
So did she ever talk about that experience with you?
Not really, no. You know, you didn't talk about things like that in those days, but I'm surmising back about how we lived our life. She also had 3 children, 5 and under, so that would have been quite busy and quite challenging in any event. Now I do know my parents went out. We would have babysitters, and the babysitters were all trainees, young Limerick women who were trainees who had moved, as I say, to Zolingen, and they would probably end up getting a few bob for their extra bit of work. I do have a recollection. One of the trainees, one day, when she was babysitting, she brought me a Beatles poster because the Beatles had played, it must have been in Dusseldorf, and all the young women went to see the Beatles. And I was trying to work out, well, a Beatle versus a Beatle, if you get there, B-E-A-T-L-E and B-E-E-T-L-E, and because the poster had a graphic of a Beatle and the Beatles, but it obviously became clear to me, and it was very exciting, that the Beatles were in Dusseldorf and all the young women and trainees went to see them.
Good. And so when you came back, do you remember the move and what happened then?
Yeah, I do recall coming back. So we'd been based in Dublin originally. We came back and then moved to Limerick. The factory was just about to be opened, the original factory in what's now Roxborough. There were a number of houses for the German managers and their families behind the factory, where the Maldron Hotel now is located. They'd been knocked down since. There were about 12 or 15, I think. One house was for Mr. and Mrs. Krups and their family, and they spent some time in Limerick, and their boys went to school in Limerick. I remember the three boys. They went to school in Limerick, and then there were various other managers, and those who had families had brought their families over, and their children went to school in Limerick as well. So we lived there for about, I guess, probably 2.5 years. One recollection I do have, I remember watching the 1966 World Cup final with my father in that house. So we must have been there for at least 2 years. So it might have been 3 years, and that was quite a close-knit community. In that, as I say, Mr. and Mrs. Krups were there quite a bit, and their various managers and supervisors were there. And I do recall, they socialised, and you'd have them coming in and out of the house at different times. Again, I guess from my mother's point of view, everything was linked to work. That that social life and family life were linked to work, because the factory was just 200 meters away, and the social networks were based on working relationships. So eventually my family moved out to a different part of Limerick.
And did you, as a child, did you mingle with these other children from the German
Yes, because, well, going back to our time in Solingen, I do recall mingling with the Krups boys. So I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Krups, although they were the owners of the company and a member of the family that had the company for 3 or 4 generations, they were, maybe paternalistic is the wrong word to say, but they were very involved in the life of their managers and their supervisors. Obviously, when we were an Irish family in Germany, I think they were particularly good to us to make sure that we were integrated. So when I went to kindergarten, it was the Krups family driver who brought me every day. Herr Richter, I remember his name. And he would collect me in the morning at whatever time, leave me to kindergarten and collect me and bring me home in the afternoon. I do recall he had quite stilted English. And the first day he opened the rear door of the car and he said, "Please get in the backside." And I, as a 5-year-old, was stunned. So obviously he meant the back of the car. But so that was quite funny. It still is. But I mean, the point I make is that Mr. and Mrs. Krups, he was our driver, and our company and family driver, he was there. I do recall being in our house several times. Now, how frequently, you can't, but we were in our house and playing with her boys, as 5-6-year-old boys do. There was another manager whose sons were about the same age as me and my siblings, and again, I would have been in their house and would have known their boys, so that when they all came to Limerick, I knew this bunch of children. In the Krups estate, of course, there was a green area, there was a sand pit, there was a little swimming pool that none of us were allowed into unless there was parental supervision for good reason. it was outdoor as well, which didn't help in Limerick or Ireland. But again, the children in the estate played together as children in any area would play together.
And what was the language of communication amongst you?
Probably a mixture of both. And in that challenge sense, you just mix between one language and another without being conscious of what language you're speaking. But progressively, then I lost all my German. I mean, just because there was no language formation in Irish schools. Whereas, but obviously, when I was in Solingen and I was with 5 and 6-year-old children, they didn't have English, and I interacted with them, so we got on in some way, a mixture of Pidgin German and the way children get on with one another, I guess.
And you said so the 2-3 years you were in the estate with the other German managers, and then you moved out. Was Krups still such a dominant part of your lives after that?
It was significant, yep. I think first of all there was first of all, there was obviously the work context. So, I mean, I was up in the factory quite a bit. I remember my father taking me up several times to show me around the factory, to see the production lines, that type of thing, just to show what was happening there. Obviously, the managers and their families socialised, even as the years went on. My parents, because they were local, they weren't local to Limerick, but they were Irish, had, I guess, a sort of responsibility to help the integration of the German families and to acclimatise them to Irish customs and Irish ways, and to explain why everything doesn't always happen on time, and that don't expect Deutsche Ordnung or anything like that. To explain how the school system work, how you enroll your children. They would have had a bit of a role in that, but progressively over time, a lot of the single men, I think, married locally. Or some of the managers went back home. They did their stint. They went back to Germany, but quite a number integrated, married Irish people and had Irish families. And as that happened, and as time goes on, people find their own ways in Ireland.
And in general, what impact do you think Krups had on Limerick?
Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of ways. From what I can gather, it had a very significant impact. First of all, look, if you think about it, a bunch of young Limerick people, 17, 18 years of age, just leaving school, going en masse to Germany. I mean, Germany would hardly have been known for, at the time. The standard patterns of emigration were to England or America. In Ireland at that time, these were young people going to Germany to be trained to come back to Ireland to work in what at the time would have been an advanced industry. So that obviously had an impact on Limerick, and in particular on the neighbourhoods surrounding where the factory is. So Janesborough, Prospect, areas like that. I'm also aware that Krups were known as a good employer. I believe that they paid more than the average wage in Limerick, because my father did tell me, this many years later, that the local indigenous businesses were quite irate that Krups were paying quite a bit more, and that they were a more attractive employer because of the wages they paid, but also, of course, it raises the expectations for workers in local industries. So there was a bit of resistance from local companies. This is what my father told me. Over the years, I have met people who worked in the company, and they all spoke positively about their experience, about what it meant to them, how it gave them their life opportunity. So I think in that respect it did have quite an impact.
And did some of these trainees they sent over go back to Germany and stay there? Was there this other movement to Germany as well?
I'm not certain. I wouldn't know about that. I've heard anecdotes about, oh, he never came back home, I found a German girl and or whatever. So, but I don't know that about that much. No, but it must have happened,
And your parents, do you feel like they had then, did they go back to Germany themselves? Did they have a special relationship to Germany?
My father went back quite a reasonable bit, but mainly for work reasons. So he'd have to go back to Zolingen, where the corporate headquarters was. We didn't go back as a family or anything like that. My mother hasn't been back; didn't go back to Germany. But I think I know, speaking to my father in his later years, those years in Krups were probably, he said, one of the best times in his professional life, in his working life. What he did tell me, so I asked him, what was it you liked about it? He said this. He said quite a number of the Krups workers, particularly the tool makers, won prizes at international competitions for tool making and die making and that. And he said they were very proud of the fact that fellows from Limerick, the edge of Europe, go to international competitions in Germany or France or Britain and beat the best in Europe at their skills, and they were very proud of that. And I think the guys who won the prizes obviously were very proud as well. So that gave him a sense of achievement, vicarious achievement and validation. And I suppose what Krups also brought was people were skilled in new industry rather than the old industries that you had extant in Limerick at the time.
So it was like a fresh wind coming into the city.
I think it would have been, yeah. I mean, as I say, it was new industry. They were learning new skills. They were using new technology. They were exporting heavily, of course. Most of the stuff they made was for the export market. And Krups would have been one of the first foreign companies, I think, to open in Ireland. And of course, people were talking about the German miracle and hoping that the German miracle would come to Ireland as well. I think Liebherr might have been the only other major German company at the time. Would it have been?
Yeah.
Probably in Killarney. I do know my father used to go to Liebherr now and again. David had some, they had things in common, German companies operating in Ireland.
Yeah. Good. And now, just one last question. You said you went on Google Earth and you looked at your old street. Have you gone back to where you were when you were a 5-year-old?
No, but it's on my bucket list. So I'm actually looking at it. My children are sort of in, we'd love to see where you lived and that type of thing. So I would like to go. I think it would just be, spend the night there. I do obviously remember the house, the apartment. It was I think a 3-story house divided into 3 apartments. So it would have been a family home at one point divided into 3 apartments. As I remember the bakery and the grocery shop at the top of the road. And there was a bar cafe or bar restaurant that my parents would go to. I'd been in it once or twice, the Wasserturm, which is still there. I Googled it the other night and the building is still the same. And I said the menu might be the same. And interestingly, I have a set of beer glasses that my father was given when we by the Wasserturm, when we left Germany in 1964. I still have them at home.
Oh, really?
I had them locked away, and my children have been told never touch them because they're those very fine, those very very thin, 2 centiliter German North German glasses with a lovely logo on them.
Yeah. So you're looking forward to a trip down the memory lane.
A trip down memory lane. I will also tell you on memory lane, my mother in Krups in Limerick, they did 3 main products. They did kitchen scale, a bathroom scale, and a food mixer. And my mother, I recall my mother got a set of these when the first batch were produced in Limerick. My mother was given a set. I guess a present. And she was given sets of other new products like these things for slicing vegetables and etc. So the mixer she was given in 1964, 1965. My sister has it and it still works 60 years later.
Wow.
It weighs a ton. Compared to modern mixers, it weighs a heavy. But it isn't. You will hear people talking about the quality of the products they made. They were made to last not a lifetime, but several lifetimes. When my mother died, my sister grabbed it, and I phoned her recently. I said, because I knew I was doing this. I said, "Do you still have that mixer?" She said, "I'm still using it."
That's amazing, isn't it? Great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.